Welcome to She Has a PhD, the podcast where we celebrate extraordinary women in science. I'm Isabel Castaing, and I'm thrilled to be part of this empowering journey with you, our listeners, as we explore the stories behind inspirational women leaders in science. Today, I have the immense pleasure of hosting Dr. Naama Kanarek on our podcast. She is an assistant professor at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Her research group focuses on studying metabolic adaptations of migrating cells, employing cutting-edge methods in molecular biology and biochemistry, including functional genomics and metabolic profiling. I came across Dr. Kanarek in a seminar where she discussed how she promotes work-life balance in her lab, a practice I found truly spectacular. I am excited to dive into her fascinating story and journey today. Welcome, Naama.
Thank you.
So let's start by getting to know today's guest better. Naama, could you please briefly tell us some more about yourself? Please tell our audience some more about your background, perhaps what moves you in life.
Okay, so I think the first thing that will describe me is that I'm a scientist. I'm also a mother. I have 2 children, and I'm a mentor. And I think I'm a mentor much more than I'm a boss or a professor or any of those other titles. I think that defines what I do every day. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Israel. I did my PhD in Jerusalem. I moved to Boston to do my postdoc at MIT, the lab of David Sabatini. And then I got my position and opened my own lab in June 2019 here at Boston Children's, Harvard Medical School. And yeah, this is my current position, and I study metabolism that I love.
Thank you. Why did you pursue a PhD, and what inspired your choice to focus on immunology and cancer research for your doctoral studies?
So the short answer of why I did a PhD was because of my high school teacher who literally told me I should. So it was one of those moments in life where somebody just inspires you to make a choice. So he, in fact, told me and one more girl in my class that we should go to the medical science BA program in the Hebrew University. And we both did. And we both stayed there also to do our master's degree and our PhD. I would say that during the years of my BA, I definitely became more and more passionate about the science. And during the beginning of my master, I realized that I would like to continue and dive deeper into my project that became my PhD project.
Very nice. Who hasn't been there where someone inspired us to do a PhD? So now going through your postdoctoral research. So during your postdoctoral research at MIT, you worked with pediatric cancer patients. And actually what I'm interested in talking about is that you founded the nonprofit organization No Empty Bedsides, which I found fascinating. Can you please tell us more about the organization and the story behind it?
Yeah, it's a sad story. A son of a friend of mine passed away from cancer. He was very young. He was first grade. It was one of those just heartbreaking situations where you sort of wish that as a researcher, as a scientist, that we had better answers, right? But I remember during the Shiva, like right after he passed away, we were talking about their experience in the hospital. And it's not something that I thought a lot about before, but I realized from their stories how intense and how difficult it is and how it takes you to just this reality where you have to go to the hospital every day because you have a kid there. And my friend, they had 2 other kids, but they also had a very, very supportive community. People will like pick up the kids and bring up their laundry. And basically all that support still was not sufficient. And they still found it challenging to be with their kid every day. You know, they both had jobs. There's just a lot. And the kid was hospitalized for weeks before he passed away. And one of the things that they told me that as an Israeli, I just couldn't believe was the fact that some children in the hospital didn't have their kids there every day, their parents there every day. Sorry. They had days that the parents would come and days that the parents couldn't come. And in Israel, it's a social country. The support system is very, very strong. So if there's a family and the kid is in the hospital, like there's no question that the parents are going to be there every day. There's just no question. And it really left me with a huge gap in my heart. I was devastated just by hearing this. I remember coming home. I had my son then as a postdoc. Coming home to him saying goodbye to the babysitter and just walking into his room and looking at him and thinking to myself, if he was in the hospital, I cannot imagine not being able to be there. And many of the parents, they're not there, not because they don't want to, because they have a job, they have other kids, they have other commitments. Financially, it's hard. It's, parking is so expensive next to these hospitals. And there are all these different things that pull the parents away from the kid's bedside. So, and my first thought was, what on earth can I do, right? I'm a postdoc, I'm an immigrant, I'm a single mom myself, I have all these other things I need to juggle. This is out of my hands. But then I thought I should just try. And I started emailing people in the hospitals and asking them about this problem and to map the problem. How severe is it? How many parents actually cannot make it? And I created partnership with a team at MGH Children's Hospital. And it's fun because now I'm at Children's Hospital, but at the time when I reached out to Children's Hospital, they told me, no, we actually have very good mechanisms to deal with this. At MGH Children's, they said, no, there's space for you to come and try and help. And then a friend of mine that I've met, now she's a friend of mine. Back then I didn't know her, but I've met her. She was somebody from the community of my son's school. We started talking about the problem and she just joined and she's amazing. She has tons of energy and connections and we started fundraising and then communicating with the staff in the hospital and making sure that our mechanism will not require paperwork, that we work directly with the teams and we help the families with the most direct way we can. So a family that cannot afford transportation, we pay for a taxi. A family that needs to stay, we pay for the hotel. A family that needs some food stamps, we just pay for the meals. Sometimes there is a healthy sibling at home, and so we can pay for the daycare that is at MGH. So the healthy sibling can come to the daycare. The parents can come with the healthy sibling. So we get, usually it's a mom. Usually she comes with the healthy sibling. The healthy sibling is in daycare for 8 hours. And we have 8 hours that the sick child have his mom. And the healthy child has just like healthy time with healthy kids and great teachers. And it's just a win-win situation and it's great. So there are many solutions that we can offer to these families. And they're very simple. Sometimes with a $56 train ticket, you solve the problem, which is quite shocking, but it is what it is. So that's our organization. It's still ongoing. We had some bumps in the road lately with just what team to work with. There's the neonatal intensive care unit, there's the pediatric intensive care unit, there are the floors. And so sometimes, you have to find the right team to work with so they can find the right patients to help. And yeah, it's an ongoing effort. It's still happening. Still have money in the account. We still fundraise once a year. We do a big fundraiser. We try to raise money for the whole year. And yeah, so we still try to help. I wish we were bigger. I wish we could help more, but that's what we do.
Thank you for giving such a nice background and for what it's worth for creating it in the first place. That's fantastic. We'll make sure to put some links in the description of the episode for No Empty Bedsides if people want to contribute, have ideas on how to help, etc. Thank you. Now, changing subject a little bit, you did mention when you introduced yourself that you established your lab in June of 2019. And this also means that there was a pandemic right afterwards. How did you get there to begin with? How did you get from a postdoc to establishing your lab in 2019?
I think it's a sort of natural development that many postdocs go through. That you towards some point in your postdoc, you're like, okay, I know I want to move this forward to the next step where I'm going to run my own research and I'm going to be the person deciding what's going to be the next direction scientifically. And that freedom and that independence in science is something that is very special to academia. And I love it. I think it's a great fuel for my passion as a scientist. And so I also really like mentoring. The mentorship aspect of being a PI, I think, was also a very, very strong motivation to move from a postdoc to this position of running a lab. So it was very clear to me that this is something I really wanted to do. Of course, it's extremely challenging in terms of just it's a competitive move. Not all postdocs can become professors, and so there's always a little bit of tension with that. I was extremely lucky. I got, when I interviewed in this department, I just loved it. It's a small department, very strong emphasis on atmosphere, very strong emphasis on community, very international. We have here professors, like the faculty, we're only 6 of us, but we have one person is from Finland, one person is from Brazil, one person is from Germany, one person is from Italy, and I'm from Israel. So we're really very international department, not only in the professional level, also in the trainee level. I love it. I mean, for me to feel at home in the United States, it's really important for our mental health to work in a place where we feel connected, where we feel that we are part of a community that is accepting us the way we are. And it's, at least for me, because I'm a foreigner, it's easier when I'm surrounded by other foreigners. And it's just not weird to have an accent. And it's not weird to come from my own culture and my own food and my own whatever. And it was such a draw. And I saw the department and I saw the atmosphere. I talked with the head of the department, and he's like, the things he cares about and the things that he will prioritize are exactly the things that I care about and I prioritize. I can give a small example. I was pregnant when I was interviewing, but I wasn't really showing yet. And at some point during the interview process, when it was already like pretty advanced, I told him, listen, I wanted to start early because I'm pregnant and I want to start before the baby comes. And his first visceral response was just being so happy. And I told myself, this is the head of the department I would like to work for. This person, he knows what is important. He knows what will make his professor, which means also his trainees, happy and balanced and just doing great at their work, but also being able to do everything else that is part of our life. So this is how I got to where I am. You mentioned the pandemic. I think that relatively our department dealt with it very, very well. And I think it is because we had a good foundation and it just carries over. You go through a crisis. If a department is already very caring, then it will help you to go through that.
I resonate with so much of what you said from the international culture. I feel like I learned and I grow so much by being exposed to different ways of thinking, different foods, different cultures for sure. And what you said about finding, head of the department or anyone that you work with, and I guess is above you in the ladder, I guess. I loved what you said about working with someone and in an environment that you feel like, yes, this is where I want to work at, because it feels like you will grow. It will help you grow. That's amazing. And just maybe delving a little bit more into detail on that process, were there particular things that you would say were very, very helpful, helping you get there? Can also be, were there things that made it much harder to get there? Or do you have advice? So for early career researchers that are thinking or trying to plan to take that step to actually start their own lab, what would you say were things that helped and things maybe that didn't help as much?
I think one thing I would say is you need to know that you want this. Don't make any choice in your career due to any outside pressure. Either way, I think right now there's a very strong trend to go to industry. And I think many people are maybe being a little bit hasty in that, because they're like, oh, if I'm in my, even at the end of my PhD, if I go to a company, I can make so much more money. But, the salary, like eventually it might even out if you're getting laid off, or it's also might even out just as you move forward in your academic career. You can do consulting, you can do other things. It's like that gap doesn't stay so big for so long, but people get very drawn to it when they're young. And sometimes they have to, right? Like somebody has kids and needs to support them, and the salary right now is just going to really make a big difference for the family. Then you make decisions for your family. That's also okay. Everything is okay. But just make sure the decisions come from a very deep internal place, because where we work, we spend more time here than at home. And we define ourselves so much by our careers and by what we do. And so if you choose a career or a job or even a place that you chose just because of some external force, you're going to carry that consequence with you for many, many years. So if, for example, you interview for a department that you feel at home and you feel good, in another department that is maybe more prestige, going to the more prestige place just because it's more prestige, it's not necessarily the best, right? It might, maybe it will, because maybe then you get more grants because more prestige, or you get better students, and maybe that will fit into your quality of life. Maybe. There's no black and white, and there's no right and wrong, but you need to take everything into consideration and really go for the place that you see some harmony between your own personal needs and your professional needs, and don't go just for one or just for the other. Advice how to get there, you need so much luck, honestly. Like, we work so hard during our postdocs, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't. There are so many great jobs there that are not actually like going to be faculty, and they're good and they're interesting. And if it works out and you have this like whatever papers that you need, and then that option opens up for you, first, great, be happy with yourself. But also remember that there was a strong component of luck here, right? Like, let's be honest, this is biology. You can work for years on a very, very good idea, and then eventually you just find something that was found 20 years ago. And you end up without that big fancy paper. Were you not as hardworking? Yes, you were very hardworking. Was your idea not a good idea? Could be the perfect idea. Were you not creative? Yes, you were. You did everything right, and still it didn't work out. And first, be humble about your own achievements. Like the fact I managed to publish where it did, it was a matter of luck. We did this screen and we got this result and it worked out and it became a cool story. Great. Could have been different. Like, we go on this very, very thin line between success and failure in our postdocs, and there's a lot of pressure. I would like to tell people, try to remove some of that pressure from yourselves, because you can do everything right and still fail, and you can do some things wrong and still succeed. I did many things wrong. I had a big project that I had to drop after 2.5 years. I did so many things wrong that the fact it ended up working, it's like, great, it did, fine. But remove that pressure from yourselves. Don't take it so much. I definitely took everything very personal. I took everything as my success and my failure. And I look back and I wish I was a little bit more forgiving to myself. So I want to tell people, be more forgiving to yourself. Celebrate the success, sure, but also remember to be humble about it. And remember that it might not happen again so fast. And it's okay. It's just okay. You do good science. You ask important questions. You use the most meaningful approaches, the best you can do. And that should be the fun. And that should be where you stop with your own judgment. If I did the experiment right and I controlled it well and I put the effort and the work into making it work, and then the result is just a negative result, that's fine. That's still biology and still good work and still good everything. So I wish I was more forgiving to myself, and I was not. I was very hard on myself when things do not work out. And now I look back and that's the advice I want to give people. And another thing is, in the process, it's really important to talk to many people and get as much advice as you can. And I got just fantastic advice and support from people who went through this process before me. And it helped me. It helped me to interview better. It helped me to write my proposal better. I sent my proposal to 15 people. And some of them came back with great comments, and some of the change also what I was planning, changed my projects, not just how I was writing about it. Some people gave me more input on how I was writing it, which I still look back and this is such a great advice. Every time I write a grant, I still go back to that advice. Tells you how good it was. Some people give you comments that you're like, yeah, I don't agree, and you don't take them, and that's fine too. I mean, everything is okay, but really seek that support. And also then you realize that everything you're going through, so many people did it before you and ran into the same challenges and the same problems and the same pressure of the interview process and everything. And that also helps a lot.
Thank you. That's great advice, I would say. When you established your group, what were things that you knew you wanted to prioritize when you decided to establish your group?
So I actually have a very strong answer, because I really, really knew that I want to have a community. I want to build a group that will be a very good group to each other. And I knew I wanted to prioritize it over other things, including sometimes taking people who are best fit for that, and not necessarily the strongest academically, because I care more about the atmosphere in my lab than about other things. I think I said this before. I want to be a mentor. I don't want to be the boss. And, I'm still the boss. I still tell them, when to come and what to do. And if they don't do something well, I give them very strong feedback. Yesterday during lab meeting, somebody was giving a practice talk, and I told the person, I'm gonna be harsh now. Because we went around the table and everybody's like, "Oh, it was such a great talk! It was such a great talk!" And I was like, "It was a great talk. I'm still gonna be now like 45 minutes giving you feedback on how to make it better." So I still have that side, but I also think this is part of mentorship, because if that talk is an important talk and you need to do a good job, then let's talk about how making it better. So that is, to me, the really important and really big part of being a mentor. But having that in the context of a community, of a supportive and pleasant place. So I love my lab. I think we are a community. I think it has been successful in that. I think people in my lab feel supported. They can ask questions to each other. They share personal things. They feel good, but it's also very hard to know. Very fast I realize that I'm in my office and I don't really know what is happening. Like, it's like 2 rooms that way. I don't really know. But I can monitor it and I can ask them and I can try and get the feedback from them. And I trust them that if there are going to be problems, they will share, they will tell me. And I hope it will stay like that.
Thank you. As I said in the introduction, so I came across you in a seminar about work-life integration. And I'll just define it to make sure our listeners are on the same page here. But one can define work-life integration as a process of allowing space for both work and your personal life so that you can feel fulfilled in both aspects. So it refers to integrating one's work and life to complement and support each other. And I know through that seminar that you explained how you implement that in your research groups. So particularly, how do you achieve it in your own life, and how do you promote it in your research group?
So one thing I want to say is that I actually don't like the term work-life balance, because it implies that you have to keep on like pushing and pulling between these two. And our work, especially for us, right? I am my work, and my work defines me, and I'm a scientist, and it's such a big part of who I am. I don't want to put it in a little box that is negative. Like, something implies in the work-life balance that the work is like something that is threatening to take over our life, and then we need to protect our life. So we need to protect our life, and we need to protect our self-time, and we need to do all that stuff, yes. But I think we need to try and have a very holistic view of this, because sometimes also life can be the hard thing, and then work is the thing that you're happy to go to. I mean, you see people that go through terrible crises in life, to lose a loved one, or to go through a breakup. And then the work is going to provide you with the support and the place where you can feel good about yourself. And I had this even in my own group, people go through crises and then they come here, and here we try to give them that space to be themselves and to be their successful self. And sometimes that is also important. And so I think it's important for us also to acknowledge it. And maybe that gives a lot of more weight on the workplace to being a more pleasant workplace. Sure. Yes. But if you have it, then it's something that is part of it. So there's just one thing I want to say. I also want to say that I think that the one important thing is perspective. What happens that hurts people's feeling at work is that they lose perspective on themselves or on what they do. I can attest this happened to me many times in the past. You are too deep into your project, and then the failure feels like it's the end of the world. You cannot see beyond it. Or you're trying to work on an experiment and it doesn't work, and you bang your head against the wall again and again and again. It doesn't work. And you become frustrated. You question yourself. You question your abilities. And then, 2 years later, you look back and it's like, who cares? It doesn't say anything about my capabilities, right? And I think the only way to try and not to fall into those ditches that we all do all the time is to have perspective, to have friends that are not part of your circle at work, to have a family, to have a spouse, to have a dog, to have a parrot. I don't know what it is that's going to work for you. Every person has to find their own way to do it. I mean, I have 2 kids and a husband, and one of the things I actually at some point realized that I don't have enough time that is not family or work, and I wanted to also create that. And I can say now I put a little bit more effort into it, and that actually provides me a lot of perspective on my work and on my time at home. So it's a journey that never stops. You can find a solution that worked for 2 years and then something changes and you need to do it again. And I think it is, I, I actually think this is something worth putting effort and mindfulness and time, and making sure that you ask yourself constantly, do I have enough um, out, outside view of my own self, my own success, my own failure, my own commitments, my own self-centered needs, so sometimes people, because they're so concerned about the project and about the work, and they're becoming so narrow-minded about it, they also become toxically self-centered. Not their fault, because everything in their life right now is just like one experiment. And then you hear these horror stories about somebody taking out a sample for someone in the lab and putting their own, like why would anyone do this? It doesn't make any sense, right? And people do this because they lose perspective. I tell my people, if a project doesn't work, if an experiment doesn't work, instead of you banging your head against the wall, I much rather you go take a hike for half a day and come back and come with motivation. And also, you need to be creative in what we do. Most of the solutions we find for problems we have are creative solutions. You can't be creative if you're stuck in the same place and you can't see beyond your current challenge. You have to step out a little bit and then see into the problem from a new angle. And maybe it sounds like a cliche, but I strongly think this is important. It's also part of the motivation. The motivation comes from our love for what we do. Being a scientist, it's not a highly paying job. It's not like you're not going to become famous. None of it is what is motivating us. The motivation is passion for the science, for discovery. In order to keep that, you need to keep the love for what you do. And to do this, you need to sometimes create some distance. And so in regards of the work-life balance in my lab, after I said I don't like that term, I do tell my people that I expect them to go home at the end of the day. Don't stay until late night. Don't come and have like 8 hours workday on a Saturday. Sometimes we're scientists and we need to come in the weekend. We have cells, we have mice, we have little live creatures that depend on us. We sometimes need to go in to take care of an experiment or something that is going. That's fine. Come in, do what you need to do. Go do something fun with your friends, with your family, whatever you want. With yourself also. Like, go watch a movie. Do whatever you need to refresh, to regain your other activities. Have a strong hobby that you really love and can drive some self definition that is not just the scientist in you. I think it's really important. I think it's important for my people to do that because it gives them that perspective. They have some time that they're a little bit off. I work at night. I work almost every night. I work after hours. I work in the weekends. I work a lot. And I find it important to still try to make the time for my family. And my people know that I'm out of the office every day at 4:45 because I need to go pick up the kids. Like, that's fact. So I am also constantly in this pull and push of my needs, my family's needs, my work needs, my people's needs. It's constant. And I can definitely attest that when I don't do a good job, it immediately reflects on my attitude, on my function, on my performance. Everything is influenced. And sometimes it takes us some time to catch it. But I do want to encourage the people who are listening to this to keep on trying to catch it and to keep on trying to ask yourselves, do I feel right now that I have enough perspective on the different parts of my life? If I don't have different parts of my life, how do I fix it? How can I create it and try to be a more multidimensional person?
Thank you. Yeah, I personally also love the definition or the concept of work-life integration when I first came across it rather than balance. But it's funny because I resonate with a lot about what you said on identity. But it's funny how I would say probably even my husband sometimes sort of fights against my willing to say I'm a scientist. And he's much more into saying I work as a scientist, but for me, it's such a part of my identity that I absolutely agree with what you're saying. But I just wanted to say that I also respect and understand people that don't like that, also don't like that integration and prefer to sort of separate it. I'm one person at work and one person at home, and I think that would be just fine. And I wanted to ask you on perspective. Again, I agree with everything you said, and it's so funny. I've been there too. One time during my PhD, no, I had just finished my PhD, and I didn't take a break, which was a very bad choice between my PhD and postdoc. I literally hand on my PhD on Friday and started as a postdoc on Monday. And at some point, I was so exhausted that I was pipetting something wrong, and a PCR was just not working that I had done a billion times, just because I was tired. So I agree with what you said on the importance of having a break, adding some distance so you can have perspective on things. And I'm curious to dig a bit deeper on motherhood. How do you think motherhood helped you with your perspective as a scientist? And also the other way around, maybe how being a scientist helps you being a mom.
It's exactly like you said. It's a perspective. Like I can have the worst day in the lab. And it was very strong during my postdoc. I would have the worst day in the lab, and I would come home and my son is just like happy and has his own mindset on things. I'm like, we can talk about Lego for like an hour. And it also forces you to just function outside the lab as a fully functional person and not let the lab like completely consume you, which was very healthy for me. So it's exactly like you said. It creates perspective. It creates this like pole on the other end of, okay, I'm a scientist. I am a scientist. I am one of these people who define myself as a scientist. But then I'm also a mother, and it, because there's this additional thing, then even on very bad days, on days that I feel like as a scientist I did not perform good enough, and scientists will always have these days, especially doing PhD and postdoc. You have these like it's a roller coaster of emotions, of like experiments that fail, and then you have one good result. You're like, oh, I'm like, it's like Albert Einstein, and then the next day, oh, it was an artifact, right? So, and it's fine because, you know, think about what we do. We push the line of discovery. Every day we walk into the lab with the expectation we're going to be able to push the known science as we know it a little bit farther. That's a lot. We're asking ourselves to do a lot. And so, of course, we're going to fail a lot most of the time. It makes sense to fail most of the time, because even if you succeed just in a fraction of the time, you already revealed something new. So you're already on the right side of discovery. So in that context of understanding that we're going to fail so much, all of us, because that's what we are asked to do, we're asking ourselves to do, having something at home that just doesn't fail, you know, kids are awesome. And I also don't want to limit it to kids, because I think being a mother is very demanding. And I think for all the young women out there who are hesitating, I want to say that it is something that I will never regret, and added tons to my life. And to me as a scientist also, I can talk in a minute about how it also helps out a way. But also doesn't have to be that. Like I think that you can create a family, or you can create your own self, multi-dimensional, I would say character or like structure of your life that is fulfilling and interesting, and it's just you. And I think it creates the same balance that I got from my kids, but other people get from other things, and that's fantastic. And so the other way how being a scientist helps me as a mom, I think it's just, again, this perspective, this ability to say, even on days that I feel, oh, I'm not doing a good enough job, or I'm not there enough for them, all that stuff, there is that other side in my life that is very fulfilling and very meaningful. It's a big chunk of who I am and how I see myself. So it does create this, I have several big things going for me. So if one of them doesn't, the others will help me to push forward. And it's just important to remember to give that space for these things to fill your heart when one of those fronts is not working well. And we have many fronts that we have to maintain and put our time into it and our effort and our mind and emotions. Like there's so much, we invest so much in each one of these fronts, and having multiple of them, don't let it weaken you, but help it support you and carry you over when one of them is failing.
Thank you. Okay, so now changing topic a little bit, I would like to discuss with you the significance of mentorship in your journey. Are there any personal experiences or mentorship moments that have played a significant role in shaping your journey? And you have mentioned how you love to be a mentor much more than a boss. So you can also mention, I guess, how you're doing it in your lab. But I was right now particularly interested in hearing how mentorship helped you, and if there were any women leaders who played a significant role in it.
Okay, so I asked first about how mentorship helped me. There were several points in my life that somebody said something that completely changed the course of my decision making. So one of them I already mentioned, my high school teacher. He just believed in me, and he was just like, "This is what you should do." And I grew up in an Orthodox community where I think believing in my future was just not part of how I was raised. I was told more how I cannot do things, much more than how I can do things. I was pushed down quite a bit by my society, by the expectations that were pretty low. Like, just stay religious, get married young, and have kids. That was like, then you are a success story. And then comes this teacher who is just like, go do a BA in medical sciences. Go, you need to do a PhD. So definitely that moment in my life, I still remember the day that we talked about it and what he said. And obviously I followed his advice. That was a big moment. There was also another really important day that, as I mentioned, I had a project that failed. And 2.5 years into my postdoc, I was still trying to make it work. And it was a good idea. I really liked it. And then David Sabatini, my mentor for my postdoc, he said, "Listen, you're too attached to this. It's time to move on." And what he said that got me to just say, okay, fine, I'm going to just let go. He said, "We don't even know what the problem is that we need to fix," which was a very accurate description of where we were standing. We were facing a problem that we still did not find what was a problem to know how to fix it. And him saying it like that really was such an accurate description of where we were. And also just the fact that he encouraged me to just move on. He said, "You can move on now and you still have enough time to build a new project, or you can wait more and then you might not have enough time to have a new project." He said, just it's okay. Like, just move on. And I did. After that meeting, I sadly ditched that project and started a new one. And the new one worked. And suddenly, it works. I get results. And suddenly, oh, okay, this is fun. It doesn't change completely what I study. I moved into the metabolism field much more. I think that it pivoted my interest, but it was a very good piece of advice, very timely given, and very well delivered also. Like, I'm a rational person. He found a way to just show me the situation and try to bring me out from this emotional decision making that I was doing that was not helpful. So these were two moments where somebody said something and it changed what I was doing, and it really helped me. In terms of female mentors, there's one woman that really changed my perspective on science during my PhD. And early on, her name is Maria Masucci. She's an Italian researcher who works in the Karolinska Institute, and she was the head of this ubiquitin consortium that we were part of. And I would go at least once a year to these meetings that were usually in Europe. And I was just so inspired by her. She was this extremely sharp, extremely strong woman, but also just really fun. And she cared about her people. And like, she was just a great person to look up to. I was like, I want to be that. And she really inspired me. I think actually trying to push to a PhD that would be more competitive, try to do a little bit more in my PhD, publish more than one paper, apply for competitive labs for my postdoc was a lot driven by her. Another woman that is a role model for me also right now as we speak is her name is Maria Lehtinen. She's a CSF researcher. She is here on the floor. She's in my department. I joined the department, and from the first day, she was just there to help me. She was generous with her time, generous with her advice. She just, she positioned herself in my corner as like, I'm going to help you go through this because the beginning is confusing. There's so many things you need to learn. And I already went through this, so you don't need to go through the same pain. I can just share with you all my knowledge. And she did, and she still does. And it just changed my whole experience as a young professor. Harvard Medical School is a system. You need to know how to find your way in the system, how to teach, how to find the good courses to teach, how to even how to say no to some of those committees that keep on coming and stuff like that. So there's constant need for advice. And she was and still is just there for me. And being that generous is something that I just find really inspiring, but also just truly helpful. Like it changed how I do things because I know how to do them because she told me how to do them, So these are the two women I want to specifically mention, but there are others.
Thank you. Yeah. And I love what you said about, being someone at Harvard as well. Especially, I feel the first year, maybe even the first 2 years, especially after moving from Europe, I found it quite overwhelming to learn how to navigate Harvard. So it's fantastic that you have not only a mentor, but actually a female mentor, because I guess those are role models that we can look up to. That's great. Okay. So now let's wrap up today's stimulating conversation with 3 lightning questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
What's the most memorable moment in your scientific career so far?
I think it was a moment in one of these, I mentioned the Ubiquitin Consortium we had in Europe. I was about to give a talk, one of my first international talks. English was still a problem for me back then. And a minute before I go on, I'm so nervous. And I remember I can't believe I'm going to do this. And then I went up. I actually really love giving talks. And today I was just I look back and it seems a little bit silly, but I was very nervous. And then I gave the talk and it went very well. And I had many jokes in the talk and it was just fantastic. And then the rest of the conference, people treated me differently because I gave that talk. And suddenly, okay, they know what you do. They recognize you. Oh, you are the one doing this project. We're all scientists. We see each other through the light of the science that we do, right? So that was a really important moment for me to take all that nervousness and then just it came out as a talk that suddenly I felt like a real scientist. I was part of the conversation all of a sudden. I was, I'm a scientist, So that was really important moment. What else? I think, if you take one moment, I would say that moment really motivated me also to always try to be part of the scientific group.
Okay, what is the best and worst advice you have ever been given?
I think the best I already mentioned with David when he told me, okay, move on. Your project is not working. You need to move on. It's really hard to teach a project that you really like and you invested so much in. That was the best advice. It was just it's time. I every time I go back to the conversation, I'm thankful that was a decision. The worst advice, I had several teachers in my elementary school who said, you don't need to know this to cook for your husband and you can't do this and all that. I think that's the worst advice. I think creating mediocrity, especially something that is common more with females, unfortunately, still the case. I think it's worse in some communities than others. For sure, in the religious all-girls school I went to was probably among the, I don't know if the worst, but not so good in that sense. Yeah, that's the worst advice. Every advice that sums up with you can't do it, you're not good enough, is the worst advice. And they're all the same because they're all coming from a place that is not after your own goodwill. It's after some, not goodwill, good success. it's after something else. Either the goal is, in my case, it was more like a religious, cultural goal, or somebody just wants to feel better about themselves by making you feel worse about yourself. Either way, when somebody says that, it's always the worst advice.
And look where you are now. I'm so happy you
I
fought
still don't
that
need to
advice.
know this to cook for my husband, mostly because he's the best cook I ever met, and I'm not even trying anymore. So yes, you see, they were right. Just for the wrong reasons.
And now for our final lightning question. And you have mentioned several, so I guess you can say it again. But if there's another woman, so is there a remarkable woman leader in science you admire and think the world should know more about?
So I mentioned Maria Masucci. I mentioned Maria Lehtinen. Funny, both Marias. There's also Kim Stegmeyer, which I admire her. She's a doctor. She's a researcher. She's doing everything she does. She's so good at it. And at the same time, she finds time to chat and to give advice and to be a good mentor. And I see her as one of my mentors at the moment. Just to see how she manages it all is like it's remarkable. Yeah, and one more person I want to mention is my lab manager, who's actually now going to open her own lab soon in Vienna. Her name is Dr. Boriana Petrova. I call her Bori. And she's just an inspiring human being with tons of interesting things in her life, always balancing many different sides of her personality, which is just fantastic. She always aspires to do everything better, everything she does. And that's such a push for everyone around her. So she's just one of these people who is always going to make her environment better. Like, always.
They all sound amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Naama, for sharing your story and experiences and for introducing us to the inspiring woman leader that you are. It has been a pleasure to have you on She Has a PhD.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very, very grateful for it.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode. Please consider subscribing to our podcast and feel free to share it with your network. We'll be back soon with more incredible stories of women breaking barriers in science. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and remember that each of us can ignite positive change in our ever-evolving world. Until next time.